Alright guys, welcome back. So after a few tweaking to the smoke, it's basically ready to go, but I'm gonna give it just a little bit more interesting feature here. Let me actually turn off the noise here because it's just gonna slow down the system for now, and maybe disable that. I'm gonna go to the scene view and then hold it down Control and create a point light. And for this point light, I'm gonna make it follow the emitter. So back here in the emitter, I'm gonna grab that transform, right click on translate and copy parameter right here and go back to the point light and go to the transform, right click on the translate here and paste a relative reference. This is going to allow me to make the point light positions and always follows that animation that is actually directing. As you can see, it's already almost always following the smoke or the emitter of the smoke. Anyway, so let's take a look at how they looks like now. Okay, go to do a render here now. It's basically emitting light like this. And just to make things easier to see, I'm gonna go to the light and change the color to something like maybe a green color, so we can really see a cool effect. And again, it's gonna always follow the smoke and leading it whenever it is, whenever the emitter is, right? Wherever the emitter is, this light will be also there. And I can change the exposure to maybe something lower, like 3, so it's not like super strong. Just want a leading kind of like cool light. And you can also see some volumetric kind of like scattering. It's not really doing that. What's really happening is just the light poking through the fog because it's not super dense. But either way, it's a cool effect. I'm gonna change that back to 1, so it's like not super strong, and I can maybe see a little bit, make it looks like it's a little bit inside of the fog and trying to lead it. Cool. So with that alone, I can give this smoke a lot more life inside of it. Okay, cool. So a few things you can tweak, of course, like for example, if you want it to be like going across more smoke, you can go back to the shadows and you can make the shadow intensity lower. As you can see, the lower this is, the more smoke it can go through to give it like a more volumetric kind of like scattering happening inside. Again, this is not real volumetric scattering, but it's really cheap and good enough. Unless you want to see God rays, you don't really want it to or needed to turn on the volumetric lighting. But in case you're curious, the volumetric lighting is going to be underneath the Metra nodes limits, underneath rendering limits, and this guy, the volume limit. Change that to something bigger than 0. That's going to allow real volumetric scattering happening in the fog, but that's going to be again dramatically slow down the system, so don't really recommend you to do that. It's super expensive. Okay, as you can see, it's really slow now, but as you can see more light going through and really scattering inside of the fog. It's just better quality wise. So if you have a really good machine, you can probably consider that, but I'm not, so I'm gonna zero that out. Okay, as you can see, it's getting darker because lights are not really scattering inside. It's basically force poking through direction, doesn't really go around or scattering around. It basically just goes up. Anyway, so here again on the material side, you can also go back to the general and go to the shadows and lower down the shadow density to also allow it to poke through more. Maybe that's too bad. Go up to 1. I actually like the result I'm having earlier, like 1.5, maybe even 2, just to give it a lot more like variations and concave shapes happening, give it more dynamic look. Maybe 1.6. Okay, cool. So let's say we're happy with the render, and we can go ahead and crack up the render quality by going to, again, the Mentra here underneath Alt. Yours could be Mentra IPR or something, but either way, it's the renderer here. You can go ahead and change the sampling pixel sample to 6 by 6, and that's gonna make it actually twice as much sampling on either direction of the pixel, so you're basically getting 4 times more ray tracing for every single pixel, and that's gonna crack up the quality quite a bit. Okay, individual settings are down here. Don't really change those things too much, except that you really wanted to toggle, like maybe you see noise happening a lot only on the subsurface scattering. You can crank that up and lower down the diffuse quality and things like that. I'm not really worrying about that too much. I think I can accept like 30 seconds or 1 minute, kind of like render time. It's okay. And underneath the rendering here, you can have the motion blur if your object is moving super fast. You can check on override camera resolution and tell it, what kind of resolution you want to go for by changing the resolution scale to user specified resolution to really tell it what kind of resolution you want to go for. Right. 2080 and 1280 and 720p is pretty good. And I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to change the valid frame range to render frame range only using, as you can see, the expression is just the frame start and frame end. 80 frames should be good. And I guess that's all I want to go for. The place to save it, let's go to the images, and that's where you save it. I'm going to again change that to job and render, and name this guy smoke render, and I guess that's all I have to do to tell it. I don't need the operator string there. Okay, on the extra image plane, you can maybe create some more image planes by clicking that, and here in the drop down menu you have a lot of options like direct lighting and things like that. Let's see if you check that and do a render. You can go ahead and change that to direct lighting. As you can see, that's the result from the direct lighting. It doesn't have alpha though, or the basic color. You can have more different render passes basically, and that's something deeper, and I don't think we need to go over that yet, so I'm gonna close that. But for compositing purposes, people always like those different render passes for the compositors. Close that. Maybe let me just go ahead and zoom out a little bit from the camera. Let me change that the camera to the camera 1. Lock it and zoom out. Make sure that I'm covering everything when they're moving around. Make sure that everything is in the camera. Cool. Now I can then really start doing my render by go back to Mentra and just click on render to disk. And that's gonna start the rendering, right? And this is gonna take a little while too, so I'm gonna actually go sleep, and in the morning I should be able to see the render result, and then we can really talk about how maybe we can do a little bit more change in Nuke, but for now we have to really wait. Okay, so thanks for watching. See you next time.